Brodes Media.
Let's start Sixers. They're 1-6. Their offense looks abysmal. Dribble, handoff. There's not much being ran. It's very blah. Now they're missing Joel, but this is the big picture disappointment. The idea heading into the season was they were going to work with Joel Embiid differently this season, right? They laid out an entire plan. So knowing you were going to be without the big man for more games than you are accustomed to, that means when Maxey and Paul George are out there, you got to win games. You got to look competent. You have to look like an NBA team. It can't go from when Embiid's back, you look like an NBA contender. And then when he's not there, you're in the lottery and potentially getting the number one pick overall. Then you're not really an NBA contender, even with one star changing franchises all the time in that league. It can't be that big of a separation. They need to do better without Embiid because it was always going to be without Embiid. For you to have a respectful opportunity in the playoffs, you got to give me some life without him. Now you're missing Maxey. Add that into the mix. I find it hilarious that Embiid's good to go against the Clippers about 3 hours later. He's suspended 3 games. It's all just crap. The messaging's all crap. Nick Nurse said post-game after the Clippers game, not that I expected many of you to stay up till 1:30, 2 a.m. to watch them. That third quarter was a disgusting effort, just putrid. They make a little run, a 7-0 run. Here's a 15-2 run the other way. I mean, this is the type of experience I get when I set aside my time to watch Sixers hoops through the first 7 games of the season. It's ridiculous. Nick Nurse said that the move to pull Maxey from the game was precautionary. This dude's missing a serious amount of time with the hamstring. Even watching him walk off the floor, you knew it wasn't precautionary, but this is typical Sixers. This is what they do. And this is probably the worst case scenario you could have ever laid out in the history of the worst starts of seasons. I mean, it does go deeper than just the product on the court, right? I mean, we're sitting in a world where Joel and columnists are getting into beef behind the scenes. We have more investigations than we do points scored for Joel Embiid. It's unbelievable. And this Maxey news is extremely disappointing. I would like to think Embiid returning against the Knicks when they do that in-season tournament stuff, whatever, when they get back around to next week. I like to think him and Paul George can do something. But the idea for me, it obviously wasn't for the Sixers, but the idea for me this season was to find cohesive basketball. It was to find chemistry. It was to have Maxey, Embiid, and Paul George as the three-headed monster running sets, creating an identity, having time and a whole year to play X amount of games together. So when the playoffs come around, you have some good knowledge of who you are and who you want to be. It doesn't work when you just throw a bunch of pieces around and hope and pray that it can happen organically in a short amount of time. It doesn't work that way. This reminds me of when the Nets And the difference is I don't even think these three will be as good as those three were. But when the Nets had Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant, they didn't play a ton. But when they were together on the court, they were sensational. I don't think that this group will be the level that they were sensational. But my point is, the reason why I correlated is I just don't think we're going to see these three guys on the floor at the same time. Because what are the odds that by the time Maxey returns, there's not something happening to somebody else? What if Maxey eventually returns, but it happens to fall on the second half of a back-to-back that Joel Embiid isn't going to play because that's already written down in stone? And then Paul George misses the next game. Then it's just Maxey and Embiid. I mean, seriously, out of 82 games, we might see them play together 20. What's that do for you? What's that do for you? And I think now it's fair criticism to wonder how Nick Nurse is going to keep this all together. I don't hate Nick Nurse. I'm not calling for firings of the coach. I'm saying there was a plan. In this plan, like let's use last night, for example, because last night it's a little different than looking forward without Maxey. You are supposed to be prepared to play with Maxey and Paul George as a 1-2 punch without Embiid. You have to be, right? Like, if you're not prepared for that, then you're not prepared for the season. I'm seeing garbage offensively. Garbage offensively. I'm seeing sloppy-ass turnovers where they have no clue where to throw the ball. It's hitting people in body parts and then going out of bounds. Now the Clippers get another possession for free. I'm seeing Maxey standing there doing nothing, not even being a part of the action. I'm watching Paul George play 17 minutes when he actually shoots the damn ball efficiently, and you need him to win the game. He's barely even out there. He had a way better night shooting against the Clippers than he did the Phoenix Suns. And by the way, you should have won that game against the Suns. Yes. Yes. Yes, you should have. Look at what happened down the stretch. Breaking news. The Sixers can't get it done in crunch time. But you have to win that game. Yeah, the Suns are good. I've seen the Sixers, fully healthy in years past, lose to a shit team all the time. It happens. You have to win games shorthanded if you are going into the season with this overall plan without Joel. That was more of through the first 7 games, which, by the way, they're lucky they weren't 0-7. Remember, they won that one game in overtime, and the Pacers thought they let one slip. Listening to Tyrese Halliburton at the end of the game, and always like, yeah, do we, that's on us. That's what we need. That's one that we let go. So, that's kind of where we are right now. I've seen criticism of Nick Nurse and his rotations, and while there are limitations with who he has available, it's something along the lines of this. Take it for what it's worth here, okay? Because I know they do lack, I'm not going to say full-on talent, but they do, superstar-wise. But more along the lines of like, what's the idea here? And this is the criticism I've heard. If you have the Frenchman who's playing 5, he's playing the 5, and he's a smaller 5, wouldn't it make sense then to have bigger and lengthier guys playing other positions? And instead, you're watching Nick Nurse go small with Maxey, with Kyle Lowry, and they are also not big for their position. So now we just have a bunch of men out there who are too small to perform at their positions all across the board. You might be able to work around having smaller guards with an Andre Drummond with size to help out, If you were to get beat on the defensive side of the floor, things of that nature, right? It's just like basic sort of baseline thinking. Player X and Y, small. Player Z, small. Do we put all the small guys out together? Do we find ways to get some version of an identity out there and keep consistent lineups? Do we keep throwing things around to just mess it all up and hope and pray that something works? How do we do this? There doesn't seem to be structure. There doesn't seem to be concepts. And isn't that a problem, considering they entered the year telling us that they have this under control, that they have a vision, that they have this plan? Because I don't see a plan. They got to get wins, though. I mean, at some point, you have to look at the standings. You do. I mean, you just do. Last year, they lost in the first round. That's a fact. We keep talking about getting out of the second round. They lost so many regular season games because Embiid needed to have surgery and he had the meniscus issue that it then put you in a position where you had to play a first round matchup that should have been a second round matchup, but you had so many losses in the regular season, that's what you had to do. Well, I don't feel good about this group if that's where they are again. And when you dig yourself into such a hole early, think about what this means you have to do if you're back with Embiid to get yourself out of this funk. You can't just be great. You got to be fucking elite. Like, you got to be fucking amazing. Because if you're just good, then you're going to end up being average by the end of this with the full body of work. I need you to get yourself out of this and then some. And to do that, when Embiid's already going to play a certain percentage of the season as it is, you can't have any mistakes. You can't have any hiccups. You can't have any of that.